Picture this. It is late June 2026. A massive typhoon has just battered the mountainous spine of Taiwan.
Oh, wow. Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, outside this small staff dormitory, the wind is just howling, the rain is coming down in sheets, and it is freezing. But inside, sitting completely alone, is a frontline railway worker.
Right.
And he pulls out his smartphone, switches the audio recording to mono, turns on a voice isolation feature, and just starts talking.
He's deliberately filtering out the storm.
Exactly. He's filtering out this chaotic storm raging against his window so that his microphone only picks up his voice. And you're listening to this deep dive today because we actually got our hands on that exact audio log.
It's such a remarkable piece of primary source material. I mean, truly.
It really is. And that image, using technology to filter out the noise of a massive storm to capture a single clear human voice, it's basically the perfect metaphor for what we are about to do today.
I love that.
Because we are going to filter out the relentless storm of corporate bureaucracy, standard operating procedures, and all that systemic friction to examine one tiny, seemingly insignificant moment of human empathy.
Yeah, we spend so much time looking at macro-level data, analyzing corporate strategies or broad economic trends, that we just rarely get to hear the unfiltered, real-time psychological processing of a single frontline worker.
Right, the guy actually on the ground.
Exactly. This audio log functions almost like a localized black box recording. It gives us a window into the micro decisions that actually keep massive, complex systems running.
And the specific system we are looking at is just fascinating in its own right. So our mission today is to examine a single transaction at a tiny manual ticket booth deep in the Alishan Forest Recreation Area.
Which is an incredible setting.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to break down the split-second psychological struggle between enforcing strict, unyielding rules and extending genuine human warmth. We're going to look at the deeply emotional side of professional service work.
The kind of work you interact with every single day.
Yes. But you probably never think about it from the other side of the glass. And ultimately, we are going to explore how a mere 100 new Taiwan dollars, which is essentially pocket change, right?
Basically $3.
Yeah. How that tiny amount can be utilized as a massive high-leverage tool to generate what this worker calls infinite emotional value.
The underlying tension here is just one of the most universal conflicts in modern society. I mean, it's the rigid architecture of a system versus the fluid, completely unpredictable reality of you human beings operating within it.
Right, the machine versus the person.
Exactly. The railway network, it has to function on absolute binary logic. A ticket is either valid or it's invalid. A transaction is complete or incomplete.
There's no gray area for a computer.
None. But humans do not operate on binary logic. We forget things. We make mistakes. We get incredibly stressed out on family vacations. And how a frontline worker navigates that collision, that's what makes this source so compelling.
But before we get to that collision at the ticket booth, we really need to map out the world this worker inhabits. Because you cannot understand the pressure of his job without understanding the extreme physical and historical landscape he is working in.
Oh, absolutely not.
So he's a duty station master on the Alishan Forest Railway network. Now, when most of us hear railway today, we picture like a high-speed bullet train, right?
Sleek, computerized, super quiet.
Yeah, zipping between massive concrete megacities at 300 kilometers an hour. But Alishan is the absolute antithesis of that.
It's a completely different engineering paradigm. Really a completely different operational mindset.
Yeah.
The Alishan Forest Railway was originally constructed over a century ago, primarily for logging the massive ancient cypress trees in the region.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And it is a narrow-gauge mountain railway. When you are engineering a train to climb from near sea level to over 2,000 meters in elevation, you're fighting physics every single inch of the way.
Right, you can't just go straight up.
No, you can't just build a straight line up a mountain. You have to use incredibly complex routing. So spirals, switchbacks, Z-shaped routes where the train actually has to stop in reverse direction just to zigzag its way up the sheer face of the mountain.
And the worker breaks down his specific ecosystem in the audio log, which really helps visualize this whole setup. So first, you have the main line. This is the arduous climb. It runs from Chiayi City all the way up to Alishan Station.
The big journey.
Yeah, it's about 71 kilometers long. And because of those switchbacks and the steep grade you just mentioned, it takes a punishing 4 to 5 hours to make the journey. It's incredibly slow.
Which is why the journey itself kind of becomes the destination. It forces this deceleration. The worker even mentions the famous 1-hour stop at Fenshihu.
Oh, yes, the Fenshihu bento boxes. I love that detail so much.
That's right.
He talks about how the train stops for a full hour, specifically so passengers can disembark, stretch their legs, and buy these traditional railway bento boxes. I mean, back in the mid-20th century, before modern convenience stores, this was really the only way passengers surviving a grueling 5-hour mountain climb could get a hot meal.
It's deeply steeped in nostalgia.
It is. And it shows that the railway is selling an experience, a piece of living history, not just transportation from point A to point B.
Right. And once you finally reach the main recreation area at the top, the system splinters into what he calls the daytime branch lines.
Yeah.
So you have the Zaoping line, which heads further uphill, and then you have the Shenmu line.
And this one is critical.
Very critical.
Yeah.
It's downhill from the main Alishan station to Shenmu station. It is an incredibly short spur. The worker notes it is only about 1.5 kilometers long, and the ride takes a mere 6 to 7 minutes.
Wow, that's nothing.
Yeah, it exists almost entirely to shuttle tourists down to a specific cluster of ancient trees.
And just to round out the map, he also mentions the Sunrise Line, the Zushan Line. That one is famous for being the highest railway station in all of Taiwan, where people go at 4 in the morning to watch the sun rise over the sea of clouds.
Thank you, beautiful.
It does. But here's the kicker. Our worker isn't stationed at the glamorous, high-altitude Sunrise Peak, and he's not at the bustling main hub of Alishan Station either. He is stationed at Shenmu Station.
Which, geographically and operationally, is a very specific kind of outpost.
Okay, let's unpack this. He calls it the absolute lowest point within the park's railway ecosystem. The altitude is 2,138 meters. Every morning before the first train even arrives, he and his colleagues literally have to hike downhill through the forest just to get to their booth to set up for the shift.
That is quite the commute.
Right, and let's talk about that booth. We are in the year 2026 here, yet he describes a completely manual environment. It's this tiny wooden cabin. There's no internet connection. There are no computerized ticketing kiosks.
Nothing digital at all.
Nothing. There's a pane of glass with a hole in it, a stack of pre-printed cardboard tickets, and a manual metal ticket puncher.
That technological isolation is just crucial to understand for what happens later. I mean, in a modern, computerized point-of-sale system, every single transaction is instantaneously beamed to a central server, right?
Yeah, it's all tracked immediately.
Exactly. Inventory is updated, revenues tracked, and refunds are processed with, cryptographic security. But at Shenmu Station, the worker is operating an analog island.
An analog island, I like that.
Yeah. Reconciling tickets means physically counting pieces of punched cardboard at the end of the shift. It requires a high degree of trust and personal responsibility because the system relies entirely on the physical presence of the ticket and the worker's manual accounting.
Right. And surrounding this tiny analog island is a vast, overwhelming natural environment dominated by the very thing the station is named after. Shenmu literally translates to sacred tree. And this tree is not just local flora, it is the gravitational center of the entire area's mythology.
The way the worker speaks about the Shenmu reveals so much about his worldview. I mean, he is deeply invested in the romance of the landscape. He doesn't just see a large piece of timber, he sees a historical monument.
Passionate is an understatement here. He talks about this tree as if it were a mythological titan. He firmly believes it to be 3,000 years old. He even quotes a classical poem inscribed on the nearby Shenmu Pavilion.
Right, the one about the frost.
Yeah, the translation of the lines he fixates on and goes something like, majestic, ancient, braving the snow and frost, standing tall since the dawn of time. And he specifically geeks out over that phrase, since the dawn of time.
Why is that specific phrase so important to him?
Well, in Mandarin, it references Pengu, which is the ancient mythological figure who literally cleaved chaos apart to create the heaven and the earth. That is the scale at which he views this tree. He just loves the idea of this proud, stubborn, solitary sentinel fighting the elements for 3 millennia.
But the source material introduces a brilliant, kind of jarring reality check right here. The worker openly acknowledges that modern science eventually caught up with local mythology.
Always does.
Yeah. Botanists and forestry experts came in, analyzed the tree, and fundamentally dismantled the 3,000-year-old solitary giant narrative. They proved that the sacred tree was actually a merge tree.
Okay, I have to pause here because biologically, how does a merge tree even work? Does one tree just eat another one?
Well, not exactly eat, but it's a fascinating botanical process called inosculation.
Inosculation.
Yes. Essentially, when two or more trees of the same species grow in extreme proximity, often because multiple seeds germinated in the exact same nurse log or patch of soil, their trunks eventually expand and touch.
Okay.
Over years of wind movement, the friction literally rubs away the outer bark where they meet. Once the bark is gone, the inner layer, the cambium layer, which is responsible for the tree's growth, is exposed. And if the cambium layers of the different trunks press together, they can actually graft naturally. Their vascular tissues fuse, and they begin to share water and nutrients.
So they become one organism.
Practically, yes. Over centuries, the outer bark grows around the entire cluster, making it look indistinguishable from a single, massive trunk.
That is wild. So it's basically a botanical collective disguised as an individual.
Exactly. And because of this, the scientists determined that it wasn't a 3,000-year-old ancient survivor from the dawn of time. It was a cluster of younger trees that had fused together, and its true age was estimated at only about 600-plus years.
Which is still incredibly old. I mean, 600 years ago is the 1400s. But the worker's reaction to this scientific revelation is just hilarious to me. He absolutely despises the facts.
He really does.
He stubbornly, actively rejects the scientific consensus. In his recording, he basically says, "I don't care about their botanical studies. I refuse to believe it's only 600 years old just because it grew with some other trees. Whenever tourists ask me, I still look them in the eye and tell them it's a 3,000-year-old sacred tree."
I want to dig into why he does this, because it isn't just stubbornness. It's a profound statement about human psychology and what we actually value in our interactions. We are a storytelling species,
Definitely.
We crave grandeur, narrative, and emotional resonance over dry, empirical facts. A solitary titan, standing against the frost since the dawn of time, is a narrative that evokes awe. A 600-year-old naturally grafted cluster of vascular tissue is, well, it's a footnote in a biology textbook.
Yeah, it doesn't look quite as good on a postcard.
Precisely. The literal truth, the botanical reality, is less valuable to him and arguably to the tourists than the emotional truth of the myth. This is our first major clue about the worker's internal compass. He is telling us straight up that he prioritizes human emotional resonance over strict, cold analysis. He's totally willing to bend the empirical rules to preserve a sense of wonder.
That is such a vital piece of his psychology to hold on to for what happens later at the ticket window. But the story of the tree doesn't end there, and the worker goes on a massive historical tangent regarding its ultimate fate, because the sacred tree isn't actually there anymore.
No, it fell over in 1998.
Right, and its path to falling over is where ecological history violently intersects with political history. The tree didn't just die of old age or botanical fusion. It was struck by massive lightning storms, twice. Once in 1953 and a devastating second strike in 1956.
The worker describes that second strike vividly. He says it literally burned the tree hollow from the inside out. It was a standing corpse, just a charred husk of bark holding itself up.
And logically, a massive, dead, hollowed-out tree right next to a railway line carrying thousands of tourists is a catastrophic safety hazard. It should have been felled immediately.
But it wasn't. And this is where the worker introduces a heavy element of historical critique. He details how there was immense, top-down political pressure from the highest levels of the government to keep the dead tree standing.
They went to extreme lengths, didn't they?
Oh, extreme. Even bringing in other soil and planting saplings near the top of the dead husk to make it appear as if the tree was still sprouting green leaves. It's an elaborate state-sponsored optical illusion.
Mm-hmm.
And the worker explicitly notes that this mandate was driven by Chiang Kai-shek.
Now, it is important for us to step back here and look at how the worker frames this, because it gives us a clear view of his personal ideology. The author of our source material explicitly expresses a very strong, deeply personal disdain for Chiang Kai-shek.
Yes, he does.
In the audio log, he flat out labels him a dictator. He grounds this view in the tragic events of the 228 incident in Taiwan, which was a severe and bloody period of suppression in 1947 where many Taiwanese civilians died. He clearly views Chiang's government as an oppressive, authoritarian regime.
He even uses a bit of historical trivia to mock him. He goes on this tangent comparing Chiang's real name, Chiang Chung-cheng, and his courtesy name, Chiang Kai-shek, to the naming conventions of legendary figures from the ancient text romance of the Three Kingdoms.
Right, the Guan Yu comparison.
Yeah, he compares the structure of his names to Guan Yu, whose courtesy name was Yu Cheng. He uses it almost as a way to highlight the grandiose, perhaps self-mythologizing way authority figures present themselves.
It's worth noting the worker's own strong biases here. Now, as your guides, we are simply reporting the author's historical commentary and personal political views contained in the source material. We take absolutely no sides here, but it's important to understand the author's unfiltered perspective.
Exactly. Regardless of where anyone stands on the complex legacy of Chiang Kai-shek or the broader political history of Taiwan, we're simply looking at how this specific worker interprets the world.
And what is absolutely critical is his deep skepticism of top-down authority. He looks at the history of the tree and sees a ridiculous, rigid government demanding that a dead husk remain standing purely for political symbolism, completely ignoring the dangerous on-the-ground reality. He hates the imposition of rigid structures that deny the obvious truth.
He sees an inherent friction between the mandates of those sitting in high offices and the lived, felt reality of the people actually standing in the forest. The government said the tree must be alive, so the system built an illusion to pretend it was. The botanist said the tree was only 600 years old, so the system printed new plaques, but the worker ignores them.
He is a man who constantly navigates the tension between the rules of the system and his own internal logic.
Perfectly said.
And that tension is about to explode right in front of him. So let's leave the historical myths behind and fast forward to the inciting incident of our deep dive. Let's set the scene at the Shenmue ticket booth.
Let's do it.
It is the afternoon of June 28, 2026. The typhoon has passed, but the operational storm is just beginning. The worker notes that it is a particularly busy shift. 2 different trains, including the highly popular Alishan Express, are scheduled to cross paths at Shenmue Station at the exact same time.
And in railway operations, a crossing event at a tiny station creates an immediate, massive spike in passenger density. You suddenly have hundreds of people disembarking, embarking, taking photos, and, most importantly for our worker, realizing they need to buy a ticket back up the mountain.
A massive line forms in front of his little cabin window. And remember the constraints? No internet, no automated kiosks. It is just him, his colleague, a stack of cardboard, and a manual puncher.
Sounds incredibly stressful.
If I'm working that window, my stress levels are through the roof. I'd be hiding behind the glass, just trying to process transactions as fast as humanly possible, keeping my head down.
But what the worker does here is actually a masterclass in frontline operational management. He doesn't retreat at all. He goes on the offensive.
He does.
He steps completely out of the booth, walks up to the massive queue, and begins briefing them like a drill sergeant. He announces loudly and clearly, "Listen up. We only accept cash here. We only sell round-trip tickets back to Alishan Station. Please have your exact change ready right now. If you have children, here are the exact age and height rules for adult versus child fares."
I love this. He is literally pre-programming the crowd.
It is the definition of proactive systemic efficiency. In queuing theory, the biggest cause of bottlenecks isn't the transaction time itself, it's the discovery time.
Discovery time, what do you mean?
It's the 30 seconds a customer spends digging in their purse for exact change or arguing about whether their kid needs a ticket after they reach the window. By clarifying the rules up front, he eliminates that discovery time. He forces the crowd to organize their resources while they wait.
Ah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So he's proving that he isn't just some rogue rebel who hates rules. When the situation requires it, he is perfectly capable of being a strict, hyper-efficient, rules-oriented manager. He wants the machine to run as smoothly as possible.
But no matter how well you optimize a system, the human element will always introduce anomalies.
Always.
And that anomaly arrives at the front of the line in the form of a family.
A mother, a father, and a young child, clearly under the age of 6. They step up to the window, and the father looks stressed. He explains their predicament. Earlier that day, back at the main Alishan station, the one with computers and internet, they bought their tickets to ride down to Shenmue. In the rush of managing a small kid, the luggage, the schedule, they completely forgot that children under 6 ride the railway for free. So they bought 3 full-fare adult tickets. They have a completely unused, unnecessary, expensive adult ticket in their hands.
A very understandable mistake.
Exactly. The father looks at our worker and asks, "Excuse me, can we get a refund for this extra child's ticket right here?"
This is the focal point of the entire deep dive.
Yeah.
This is the exact moment where the standard operating procedure collides head-on with human reality.
Let me throw out an analogy because I think everyone listening has been in a version of this scenario. It's like when you buy a non-refundable basic economy plane ticket online, right?
Oh, I know where this is going.
You click purchase, the screen refreshes, and you instantly realize autofill, put your nickname instead of your legal passport name. You know the computer system is going to reject you. You know the terms and conditions you blindly accepted say absolutely no changes. But a week later, you were standing at the airport counter, begging the human JATE agent for mercy. You are desperately hoping that the flesh and blood person in front of you has the power and the empathy to override the cold, unfeeling algorithm of the airline's policy. You are asking for grace within a rigid system.
Building on that analogy, the gate agent, or in our case, the railway worker, is suddenly thrust into a dual role. They are simultaneously the enforcer of corporate law and the ultimate judge of human intent.
It's a lot of pressure for a brief interaction.
It is. And what makes this audio log so rare is that the worker literally dictates his internal monologue during this exact split-second crisis. He describes experiencing a psychological schism. We can break it down into two distinct warring voices, the two brains of frontline service.
All right, I want to really dig into these two brains. Let's look at the first one. Let's look at the pure, unadulterated logic of the system.
So the first voice is the analytical brain, or the rules brain. And if we look at the strict legality of the situation, the rules brain has an absolute watertight case. First of all, the transaction is over. The goods, the physical tickets, were exchanged for currency. The contract is complete. Second, and more importantly, the ticket was not purchased at Shenmue Station. It was purchased at the main Alishan station.
And mechanically speaking, why does that matter so much? I mean, a train station is a train station, right? It's all the same company.
Not in accounting terms. The main Alishan station is computerized. They issue digital receipts linked to centralized databases. Shenmue, as we established, is entirely manual. They don't share a real-time ledger.
Ah, I see.
If the Shenmue worker simply hands over cash from his till for a ticket he didn't sell, his manual accounting at the end of the day will show a cash deficit without a corresponding digital void in the main system. He would literally be shorting his own register.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just a matter of him being difficult or inflexible. The system architecture literally isolates him.
Precisely. If he just says, no, I cannot refund this, he is 100% legally and operationally justified. To process a refund by the book, he has to tell the family the harsh truth. You must travel all the way back up the mountain. You must go to the specific desk at Alishan Station. You must explain your story to the agent there. And frankly, because people try to run scams by picking up discarded tickets, the staff there will likely have to pull CCTV footage to verify that you were the specific individual who purchased 3 tickets earlier today.
Oh man, that is brutal.
It is an absolute bureaucratic nightmare for a relatively minor refund. The rules brain says, this is not my station's transaction, therefore it is not my problem. The solution is simple. Go back to Alishan.
You know, if I'm managing that railway, I want him to listen to the rules brain. I want him to enforce the policy to prevent accounting chaos. Because what if the customer was scamming him? Isn't standard operating procedure there for a reason?
You're touching on the exact reason bureaucracy exists, to eliminate risk through standardization. Bureaucracy assumes negative intent to protect the system. But this is where the second voice, the empathetic brain, kicks in and actively overrides the risk assessment. The worker explicitly states that he consciously took a moment to put himself in the father's shoes.
He steps out from behind the glass, psychologically speaking.
Exactly. He thinks about the cognitive load of a family vacation, navigating schedules, keeping a young kid entertained, carrying bags. It is exhausting.
Definitely.
Making a minor purchasing error under that stress is a deeply human mistake. He looks at the father and doesn't see a passenger attempting an unauthorized point-of-sale reversal. He sees a tired dad whose vacation mood is hanging by a thread over a bureaucratic technicality.
And the speed at which this internal debate happens is staggering. He says it took him maybe 2 or 3 seconds to make the decision. The empathetic brain doesn't just win, it scores a total knockout.
Totally.
He doesn't just bend the rules, he completely bypasses the corporate machinery using his own personal resources. Without hesitating, he turns around, walks into his little office, opens his own personal backpack, takes out his own wallet, and pulls out a crisp 100 NTD bill of his own money.
Wow.
Yeah. He walks back, hands his personal cash to the father, and takes the manually punched, invalidated extra ticket in return.
It is a profound act of localized problem solving. He doesn't try to hack the till or manipulate the railway's accounting. He steps entirely outside the corporate structure. He acts as a private citizen, essentially buying the useless, voided ticket from the customer on the secondary market just to make the customer whole.
That's a great way to put it.
He internalizes the systemic friction. He takes the bureaucratic burden completely off the family's shoulders and places it squarely onto his own.
So the family is thrilled. The father says thank you. The line, which was stalled, immediately starts moving again. He averted a crisis. Problem solved, right?
Well, you listening, if you think the story ends here with a heartwarming moment of rogue empathy, you are severely underestimating the immune system of a bureaucracy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the complex machinery of the financial world is about to push back against this act of kindness with absolute ruthlessness.
Right, because every system, especially a financial one, has a reconciliation mechanism. You cannot simply invent physical workarounds without the broader network eventually detecting the anomaly. Right, because our worker is empathetic, but he isn't stupid. He isn't a saint looking to just light his own money on fire. He has a very logical step-by-step plan to recoup his $100.
Let's hear it.
He figures, okay, I'm currently holding the physical ticket. It's proof of purchase. I will simply send this piece of cardboard back up the mountain to the main station. My colleagues there will void it in the computer system, process the refund on the back end, pull the cash out of their till, and send my 100 NTD back down to me on the next train. It's an elegant, off-the-books relay race.
So he initiates the handoff. He spots the conductor of the Shenmue Line train that is currently idling at the platform. And standing next to the conductor happens to be a trainee.
Yep.
The worker walks up to them, hands over the ticket, explains his clever little workaround, and asks them to run it back to the Alishan station desk.
And here is where the universe delivers an incredible plot twist. It turns out that this specific trainee conductor, who is just doing a ride-along on the train today, normally works as a ticketing agent at the main Alishan station.
The irony is almost too perfect. Of all the people to hand this ticket to, he hands it to the one person who knows the computerized ticketing architecture intimately.
The trainee takes the physical ticket, looks at it for a split second, spots a tiny specific mark printed on the cardboard, and immediately identifies a fatal, unfixable flaw in the worker's master plan. The ticket was purchased with a credit card.
A total, uncompromising dead end.
I have to push back here because for anyone who doesn't work in retail or finance, this might sound confusing. Why is it a dead end? Why can't the main station just look at the ticket, see it's valid, hit refund on the computer, and hand the trainee a 100 NTD bill out of the cash drawer to give back to our worker? Money is money, right?
Actually, it's far more complex and rigid than that, and it goes to the core of global financial security. You cannot, under almost any circumstances, refund a credit card transaction by handing out physical cash from a register.
Why not?
It is strictly forbidden by the merchant agreements that businesses sign with banks, and more importantly, it is heavily restricted by international anti-money laundering laws, or AML laws.
Wait, money laundering? We are talking about a $3 train ticket in a forest.
The scale doesn't matter to the algorithm at all. The rule exists because returning cash for credit is literally the foundational mechanism for how illicit organizations wash dirty money or commit chargeback fraud.
Oh, I see.
If you buy a Rolex with a stolen credit card, and the store lets you return it for hard cash, you have successfully laundered the stolen funds into untraceable currency. To prevent this, the financial network operates on a closed-loop system. Funds must return to the exact origin of the purchase. The only way to process a credit card refund is to electronically send the digital funds back to the specific account they came from.
Which means the physical credit card must interact with the system again.
Exactly. The system requires the original physical credit card to be swiped, inserted, or tapped at the original computerized point of sale to initiate the digital reversal. The worker's physical cardboard ticket is entirely useless without the plastic card that bought it.
The implications of this are immediate and devastating for our worker's plan. His clever, empathetic workaround is completely dead in the water. The trainee basically tells him, dude, I can't do anything with this cardboard. The only way to get your money back is to march onto that train, find the father, demand his physical credit card, send the father back up to Alishan Station, and have him process the digital return himself.
The system has cornered him. The collision is complete.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to truly put yourself in this worker's shoes for a second. Imagine you are standing on the damp wooden platform of Shenmue Station. The train engine is rumbling, ready to depart. You are holding a useless piece of cardboard. You are definitively out 100 NTD of your own hard-earned money.
It's a tough spot.
You have a choice to make right now. You could sprint onto that train, you could hunt down the father in his seat, you could demand your $100 back, shove the useless ticket into his chest, and say, "Sorry, man, I tried to be nice, but the Global Financial Anti-Money Laundering Network says no. You have to deal with a bureaucratic nightmare at the main station yourself."
And we must emphasize, it would be entirely within his rights to do so. He owes this family nothing. It was his personal capital he risked. The logical, self-preserving action is to reverse his rogue empathy and let the system handle the customer as designed.
But he doesn't do it. He stands there on the platform, makes his final calculation, looks at the trainee conductor and just says, "Forget it." He takes the useless ticket back. He consciously, deliberately chooses to absorb the 100 NTD loss himself.
Incredible.
He is absolutely not going to storm onto that train and ruin that family's day. And then the audio log delivers this incredibly cinematic moment.
Yes, the wave.
The train begins to pull away from Shenmue Station. The worker looks up at the windows of the passing cars. The family, who is completely blissfully oblivious to the massive systemic crisis and the personal financial loss they just caused this man, is looking out the window. And they wave at him. They wave happily as the train disappears up the mountain.
The worker spends a significant amount of time in his recording analyzing that specific wave. It is really the emotional climax of his narrative. He specifically notes that it wasn't just a polite, dismissive wave.
Right.
It wasn't the kind of mechanical wave you give to a traffic cop or a random stranger.
Yeah.
He felt, on a very visceral level, that it was a wave of genuine human connection and sincere, unprompted gratitude.
It wasn't just a transaction anymore. It meant something.
Precisely. And if we return to our core focus today, analyzing the meaning of showing warmth at work, this interaction is the pure distillation of it. True professional service, especially on the front line, isn't just about executing rules flawlessly like a biological robot. It is about recognizing when the system is failing the human and choosing to act as the shock absorber. The worker absorbed the systemic friction, the financial loss, and the stress, specifically so the customer didn't have to. He insulated a fragile family moment from the grinding gears of the railway bureaucracy.
Okay, I love the poetry of that, I really do. But let's be ruthless for a second and look at the actual math. Let me challenge this entire premise.
Sure, go for it.
Did this guy just get played? I mean, did he just get scammed out of $100 by his own unchecked kindness? Is this a story about a guy who is just a sucker for a smiling kid? Because if every frontline worker just threw their own money at customer problems, the world would go bankrupt.
It is a valid challenge, but the worker forcefully argues no, and I completely agree with his analysis. This is where we transition into exploring the true leverage of this act. How does a mere 100 NTD become an engine for immense value?
How?
The worker refuses to view this as a financial loss. Instead, he views it as an incredible leverage point for what he calls, in Mandarin, Gingzu Jiazi, which translates to emotional value. He essentially built a balance sheet of empathy. And we can break down the return on investment, the ROI, into 3 distinct categories.
All right, walk me through this balance sheet. Convince me he didn't just lose money.
First, we have to quantify the value to the customer. For the minor cost of 1 extra ticket, he entirely saved a family's vacation mood. Consider the alternative.
Okay.
The father returns to his family, frustrated, angry at the system. They spend their entire scenic train ride stewing in annoyance, preparing for an argument at the next station. Instead, because of a $3 intervention, they left feeling cared for, relieved, and happy. That is an unquantifiable, deep, positive experience generated for the railway's patrons.
$100 to prevent a family meltdown and guarantee a good review. I mean, that's a bargain in the hospitality industry.
Second, there is the value to the system itself, which is highly quantifiable. By eating the cost, he spared his colleagues at the main Alishan station from having to deal with an annoyed, defensive customer. Let's calculate that.
Let's do it.
If the father goes to the main desk, he takes up maybe 15 minutes of a ticketing agent's time. The agent has to pull CCTV footage, which takes time from a manager. They have to file dispute paperwork for a credit card refund. During a busy afternoon shift, that 15-minute bottleneck cascades, delaying dozens of other paying customers. Our worker effectively subsidized the operational efficiency of the entire Alishan railway network with his own pocket change.
Wow. He basically paid a systemic efficiency tax out of his own wallet. He bought back time for his coworkers.
And third, perhaps most importantly, is the value to himself. He avoided a prolonged, highly stressful confrontation at his own ticket window.
Oh, that's true.
If he had rigidly enforced the rules brain and said no, the father almost certainly would have argued. The queue of dozens of tourists behind him would have grown impatient, angry, and hostile. The worker's entire shift would have been derailed by a massive spike in cortisol and negative energy. By paying 100 NTD, he bypassed the conflict entirely. He bought himself physiological peace of mind and kept his own immediate work environment pleasant.
He bought himself peace of mind. That is such a powerful way to frame it. And this brings in a wonderful, almost meta layer to the source material that just blows my mind. The worker realizes that this 100 NTD loss actually bought him an amazing story.
It did.
He literally took his smartphone, snapped a photograph of that useless, manually punched cardboard ticket, and used it as the cover art for the very audio log we are discussing today.
The financial loss was transmutated into creative fuel.
Yes, and he even talks in the audio about how a colleague from the main station gave him feedback on his audio log. The colleague told him, "Hey, I listened to your recordings at 1.5 speed while I work, and the audio quality is great." It's awesome.
The worker notes that this simple piece of feedback gave him immense confidence, joy, and a sense of validation. So that 100 NTD didn't just buy peace at the ticket window. It essentially bought the worker creative inspiration, a profound sense of purpose, and a deeper, more meaningful connection with his peers.
It is a phenomenal cognitive reframing of a micro-tragedy into an emotional and creative asset.
We usually think of the word leverage in terms of high finance, right?
Yeah.
Hedge funds borrowing millions of dollars at specific interest rates to make a tiny percentage of profit on a corporate buyout. They are leveraging capital to make cold, hard capital.
Right.
But what this isolated railway worker is doing is emotional arbitrage. He took roughly $3, the price of a cup of coffee, and deployed it at the exact right moment to generate thousands of dollars worth of goodwill, systemic efficiency, personal joy, and creative output. It's the ultimate high-yield investment. And it highlights a critical, often overlooked insight from the frontline perspective. The people on the ground, the ones actually staring the public in the eye, daily possess a unique, localized power.
Yeah, they really do.
They are the only ones who can truly recognize when the rigid, blind application of a standardized rule will cause significantly more harm than good. They have the discretion, if they choose to exercise it, to inject humanity into an otherwise mechanical process.
It really makes you wonder, if you look closely at any massive system, a hospital, an airline, a school district, a railway, how many micro-crises are being silently solved every single day by frontline workers just quietly bending a rule or paying out of their own pocket just to keep the world spinning smoothly?
I would argue it happens far more often than any corporate operations manual would ever admit or account for. Because true professional service requires emotional intelligence, not just procedural compliance. It is about understanding the fundamental intent of the service, which is to aid human beings, and recognizing that sometimes the structural rules actually act as a barrier to that intent.
So let's zoom out and summarize the incredible journey we've taken today. We traveled from a rainy, isolated mountain dormitory and the romantic, stubborn myth of a 3,000-year-old tree that defied scientific botany.
Quite a journey.
We navigated the historical friction between government mandates and ground-level reality. We dug deep into the granular, frustrating mechanics of analog ticket punchers colliding with global credit card anti-money laundering laws.
Closed loop.
And ultimately, we discovered how one frontline worker consciously, deliberately chose human empathy over rigid protocol, proving that sometimes the best way to fix a broken, unyielding system is to quietly lubricate it with a little bit of personal warmth.
It is a powerful, enduring reminder that while we all operate within vast, complex systems, we are not machines ourselves. True professional service isn't just about flawlessly executing an algorithm. It is about having the situational wisdom to know exactly when to bend those rules in order to absorb the friction for another human being.
And that brings us directly to you, the listener. If you are listening to this, think about your own daily work. Think about your own metaphorical ticket booth.
We all have one.
We all have moments in our professional or personal lives where we are technically, legally, or operationally right by the book. We have the terms and conditions on our side. But in those exact moments, we also have the option to pay a small personal cost. Maybe it's spending an extra 5 minutes of your time to explain something to a confused colleague.
Or letting go of your ego to de-escalate an argument you know you could win.
Or maybe, like our worker on the mountain, it's just literally 100 NTD out of your own wallet to save someone else from a massive headache. So, as you go back to your day, I want you to ask yourself a question. What is your 100 NTD levered today? And more importantly, are you willing to pull it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.